At the end of the racing season 1936, which wasn't so very successful at our company, I was assigned to the racing department with the object of developing a new car for the racing season 1937. Now, naturally, at that time, I hadn't any real idea about racing cars, and I took 2 racing cars of the type 1936 and went to the Nürburgring with a few mechanics and started to learn driving a racing car. Naturally, that's the thing you've got to be very careful at. So I made up my mind not to go off the road on one of the first laps, and I made a point of going round the course slower than with a normal passenger car, and to become quicker and quicker slowly. I used up 2 racing cars, and I drove about 2,500 miles, and after that I had an idea about racing cars. I could form an opinion what was wrong with the present racing cars, and I had pretty well made up my mind what one should change to improve for the coming season. First of all, you have to study the formula very closely, because naturally you have to try and get everything out of the formula you can. For example, the formula in 1937 was maximum weight 750 kilograms. The size of the engine was unlimited. You could use a supercharger or not. You could use any type of fuel. And naturally, we tried to put in the largest engine we could. The first thing is you have to decide on is what sort of engine, and then you go on to the other parts, the axles, the suspension, and which is quite a difficult point for the supercharged engine, was the tanks. The gas consumption of these engines was very high. We had a capacity of just about 400 liters. I don't quite know how much it is in gallons, but it's a tremendous lot. And it was always very difficult to get these large tanks into the body of the car. On the 5.6 liter, we had a single large tank at the back. But on later developments, when the gas consumption of the engines rose, we had to have a so-called saddle tank in front of the driver, which was built over his legs. And so the driver had a big tank in front of him and a big tank at the back. These 2 tanks were connected by large diameter hoses, and naturally, if they had an accident, the danger of fire catching light was quite big. Actually, Seaman lost his life through an accident in Belgium when his car crashed against a tree and got torn in 2 pieces, and the petrol started burning. But that was the only time that a fire occurred. Once the car has been designed, the best way to get it running as quickly as possible is to develop the individual parts of the engine and of the chassis on special tooling equipment. For example, it is far better to try out the valve drive on a test bench, because if a valve should break, it doesn't destroy an engine completely, it just falls off on a test bench. And we developed every single item of the engine, the valve drive, the supercharger, the connecting rod, on special test benches. And when we knew that every single part of the engine was safe, then we built up a complete engine and had it running. And this way we avoided destroying engines through miscellaneous defects. And once the engine had been built up, we could trim it for power. We did the same with the axles, with the suspension, also, for example, with the tanks. We had them on a test rig and gave them a thorough shaking, which was much more than they could have in actual racing. So we didn't have any tank leaks once the car was running. When we had the car built up, we took the complete car on a test bench and tried the car as a whole, tried the transmission, gear changes, the brakes, and when that was all right, then we went on to a racetrack, the Nürburgring, and started with the actual road holding experiments.